The edge of the Milky Way was never meant to be seen with human eyes. Captain Elias Juno Reiss stood on the observation blister of the UN's Ark Eternal, one hand pressed to the cold transparasteel, the other curled into a fist so tight his knuckles had gone white hours ago. Behind him, the bridge crew moved like ghosts, speaking only when systems demanded it. No one laughed anymore. No one cried in the open. They saved that for the dark corners of their quarters, where the walls couldn't record it. Out there, the galaxy's rim looked frayed. Spiral arms unraveled into black ribbons, and the usual silver-blue wash of starlight had thinned to the color of old ash. Elias had watched the same view every day for the last 6 months, and every day it was worse. The astronomers called it entropic cascade. The theologians called it judgment. Elias called it Tuesday. He was 42 standard years old, brought across the shoulders from years spent in one-gravity gyms aboard ships that never saw real soil. His black hair had gone iron gray at the temples overnight, the night the first star died. No supernova, no flare, just a red giant in the Perseus transit zone that simply stopped burning. One moment it was there, a cheerful ember older than Earth. The next, darkness where light had lived for 10 billion years. That was the first. There were thousands now. "Captain," came Lieutenant Commander Aya Lin's voice behind him, soft enough that only he could hear. "Fleet reports ready for final alignment. Gate aperture in T-90 minutes." Elias didn't turn. Casualties? 2 more colony arcs lost contact during the last jump. The Mercy of Saints and the new Kyoto Maru. We have to assume they're gone. He closed his eyes. 43,000 souls on each. Children who had never seen a sky that wasn't a hologram. Farmers who grew rice in spinning cylinders. Priests who still held mass in cargo bays because the chapels were full of refugees. Gone. Understood. He said Why a step closer. She was small, sharp-featured, the kind of woman who could recite the entire fleet manifest from memory and still find time to braid a frightened child's hair. She didn't touch him protocol, but her voice carried the weight of a hand on his shoulder. "Elias, people are asking why we're still going. The gate was built to save us, yes, but no one promised what's on the other side is better than what we're leaving. Some say we should turn back, fight for whatever's left." He finally faced her. The bridge lights carved deep shadows under his eyes. "Fight with what, Aya? There are 412 ships left out of 3,000. The core worlds are already dark." Sol went quiet 3 weeks ago. His voice cracked on the last word, and he hated himself for it. "We don't have a home to go back to. We have a direction, forward. That's all God or physics ever gave us." Aya's gaze flicked to the crucifix he still wore under his uniform, the one his mother had pressed into his palm the day he left for the academy. She had been on Titan when the moon's reactors failed. He wondered if she had time to pray. "Forward," she repeated, tasting the word like medicine. "Then let's go before the stars forget how to shine entirely." Alarms chimed, gentle but insistent. The fleet was aligning into the final wedge formation. 400 arrows aimed at a wound in space-time no human eye had ever seen clearly. The dimensional gate, built by minds greater than theirs, or perhaps by the same desperate ingenuity that had once launched wooden ships into hurricanes. No one knew anymore. The blueprints had come through a probe that self-destructed after transmission. The message attached had been only 12 words long. "You are loved. You are needed. Come home before the dark learns your name." Elias walked the central dais, boots ringing on the deck plates. Every screen showed the same countdown. Every heart, he suspected, beat to the same terrified rhythm. He touched the ship-wide address panel. "This is Captain Reiss," he began, and his voice steady, warm, a little rough from disuse-filled. Every corridor, every bunk, every cradle where infants slept against their mothers' chests. "In a few minutes we will cross a threshold no human has crossed before. I won't lie to you. We don't know what waits on the other side. It may be wonder. It may be terror. It may be both, but I know what we leave behind. I know the price we've already paid. I know that every star we lose is a grave we can never visit. We carry 3 billion souls in these hulls, and every one of them is someone's entire world. We do not get to give up. Not while we still breathe. Not while we still remember how to hope. They told us once that humanity was a fluke, a chemical accident on a blue rock. I'm here to tell you they were wrong. We are the reason the universe learned how to sing, and wherever we go next, the song goes with us. He paused. Somewhere in the fleet a baby cried, then quieted, as if listening. Stations, he said quietly. And may God have mercy on us all. The lights dimmed to jump red. Outside the blister, the last visible stars of the Milky Way's edge guttered like candles in wind. Elias returned to the glass. He raised one hand, palm open, as though he could catch the light before it fled. Behind him, the helmsman counted down from 10.0. Reality tore open. The gate was not a ring or a portal or anything so tidy. It was a scream of white fire laced with every color that had no name. A vertical wound 100,000 kilometers tall. The fleet plunged toward it in perfect silence, engines dark, riding momentum and prayer alone. Elias felt the deck shiver as the Eternal crossed the threshold. Gravity twisted, then released. His stomach flipped the way it had the first time he'd ever left Earth. For one heartbeat, the stars behind them flared brighter than suns. A farewell blaze. Then darkness swallowed the view. He waited for the cheers that usually followed a successful jump. None came. Instead, the main screen flickered with a fleet-wide diagnostic no one had ordered. Across every ship, in every language humanity had ever spoken, the same 3 words scrolled in blood-red letters. They are watching. Elias stared at the screen until the letters burned into his retinas. Somewhere in the dark between universes, something that was not human and not empty had noticed they were gone. And somewhere in the dark, the humans began to pray. The silence after the message lasted exactly 7 seconds. 7 seconds in which every soul aboard the 400-ship fleet realized the same thing. They were no longer alone, and they had never been the ones doing the watching. Then the screaming started. Not on the Eternal. Elias's crew had been forged in too. Many fires for that, but on the civilian arcs. Open channels bled raw panic in 100 accents. A rabbi on the Jerusalem's Hope recited psalms at machine gun speed. A Buddhist monk on the Lotus Dawn rang a prayer bowl so hard the ceramic cracked. Children wailed for mothers who were already holding them. Elias killed the all-fleet audio with a slash of his hand. The bridge fell into the kind of hush that comes right before a firing squad. "Comes," he said, voice low. "Isolate and mute every non-essential channel. Give me tactical only." Aya's fingers flew across her console. The red words still hung in the air like afterimages. "They are watching. Source?" Elias asked. "Unknown," Lieutenant Park answered from the sensor pit. His Korean was clipped, precise, the way it got when he was terrified. Not spoofed, not a hack. The message originated from inside our own secure mesh. Every ship received it simultaneously, down to the plank tick. Elias felt the old familiar cold crawl up his spine, the same cold that had settled there the day Seoul went dark. He turned to the main viewport. Outside, there was no starlight, no nebula, no reference points at all. Only a bruised violet. Haze that hurt to look at directly, threaded with slow lightning the color of old bruises. This was the between, the place between universes. The manuals, those few frantic pages the gate probe had left behind, called it the veil, a membrane. A womb, a grave. Elias said. "Status on formation integrity?" "Holding, sir," Ensign Rowe replied. "But the distances are wrong. Ships that should be 1,000 clicks off our port quarter are reading at 200 meters. Space is folding." Elias tasted copper. He'd bitten the inside of his cheek without noticing. He keyed the private command channel. Only flag officers and the flagship A.I.S. could hear him now. "This is Reiss. New standing order. No one, and I mean no one, acknowledges that message aloud until we know what it means. We do not feed the fear. Clear?" A chorus of strained affirmatives. He looked at Aya. She met his eyes and gave the smallest nod. "I've got your back. Good," because Elias was one heartbeat away from vomiting on his own boots. He forced himself to the center dais, stood beneath the crimson warning, and addressed the bridge. "Listen up," he said, letting the words carry the same calm he used when talking pilots down from combat shock. "We just crossed the biggest threshold our species has ever faced. Something noticed. That's all we know. Could be the gate builders. Could be God saying hello. Could be the universe's way of clearing its throat. We are not going to lose our minds over 3 words on a screen." He let that settle. "We have 3 billion souls relying on us, acting like the stubborn, impossible bastards humanity has always been. So we do our jobs. Sensors, I want every passive sweep you can run without lighting us up like a Christmas tree. Engineering, prep the Q drive for emergency translation if this place turns hostile. Aya, get me a secure line to Father Ortiz on Arc Gabriel. I want a theologian who isn't afraid of the dark." Crew snapped to it. The bridge, filled with the comforting music of purpose. Elias allowed himself one private moment. He stepped back to the blister, pressed his forehead to the cold glass, and whispered the prayer his mother had taught him when he was 5 and afraid of storms. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." The violet haze outside rippled. Something vast moved within it, too far to resolve, too large to comprehend. A pressure, like standing at the bottom of an ocean that had never known light. Elias finished the line anyway. "I will fear no evil." The pressure eased, just slightly. On the main screen, new text appeared, this time in gentle gold. "Welcome home. Children of Earth." Then, beneath it, coordinates. Not in light years or parsecs, but in something older. A single line of musical notation, 8 notes long. Aya gasped. That's the lullaby. The one the gate probe broadcast when it first arrived. The one every mother in the fleet has been singing to keep their kids from screaming themselves hoarse. Elias felt his throat close. The probe had played that melody for exactly 30 seconds before it self-destructed and gave them the gate schematics. No one had known where it came from. Until now. "Helm," he said, voice rough. "Set course. Whatever's waiting, we don't keep it standing around." "Aye, sir." Engaging sublight. The fleet turned as one organism, engines igniting in staggered sequence so the wake wouldn't blind the ships behind. The violet haze parted like curtains. Hours bled away. Or minutes. Time was negotiable here. Elias stayed on the bridge the entire watch, sipping cold coffee, watching the gold coordinates count down. When fatigue finally dragged at his bones, he relinquished command to Aya and went to the chapel. It was a converted storage bay. Rows of fold-down benches bolted to the deck. A simple wooden cross someone had carved from a crate that once held oranges from Ganymede. Candle LEDs flickered in red glass. Maybe 50 people knelt or sat, heads bowed. An old woman clutched rosary beads made from spent bullet casings. A teenage boy stared at the crucifix like it might vanish if he blinked. Father Ortiz was hearing confessions in the corner, speaking softly in Spanish. When he saw Elias, he finished absolution, made the sign of the cross over the penitent, and walked over. "Captain," the priest said. He was 70, wiry, with kind eyes that had seen too many funerals. "You look like a man carrying the sins of the world." "Only 3 billion of them," Elias answered. "Padre, tell me honest, do you think we just got greeted by angels or demons?" Ortiz smiled without humor. "I think the universe is bigger than our categories. Elias, and I think whatever spoke to us knows the sound of a mother's heartbeat." Elias exhaled shakily. "I don't know how to be what they need me to be." "You already are," Ortiz said. "You're still walking forward. That's enough for now." The deck lurched, not the gentle correction of thrusters, but a bone-deep shudder that sent candles guttering and people to their knees. Red lights strobed. Klaxons howled. Elias was already running. He burst onto the bridge in time to see the forward screen fill with something impossible. A structure. No a city. No an organism. It hung in the violet void like a cathedral grown from crystalline starlight. Kilometers wide, delicate as frost, strong enough to make the eternal look like a child's toy. Spires rose and fell with breath-like rhythm. Light moved inside it the way blood moves in veins, and at its heart, a perfect sphere of absolute black, the fleet slowed to a stop. Engines cutting out as though someone had simply asked them to be still. Every external crackled to life without input. A voice, not sound, but understanding, poured directly into the mind, spoke with the calm of mountains. "We have waited so long." Elias felt his knees buckle. Around him, crew wept openly. Not from fear, from recognition. The voice continued, gentle, vast, ancient, and somehow heartbroken. "You left footprints in the dust of 100 worlds. We followed them across the dark. Your galaxy is dying, because IT misses you." On the screen, the black sphere at the city's heart unfolded not into wings or eyes, but into a doorway shaped like the outline of a human hand. "Come, there's still time to save what you love." Elias stared at that doorway and felt something inside his chest crack wide open. Grief, terror, and a wild, impossible hope all at once. He straightened, wiped his face with the sleeve of his uniform, and gave the only order that made sense. "All ships," he said, voice ringing clear across the fleet, "prepare boarding parties. Sidearms and faith. We're going home." Behind the fleet, far away, the torn seam of the dimensional gate began to close, and in the closing, something that had been watching from the other side reached through with fingers made of pure night and screamed. The scream that tore through the closing gate was not sound. It was absence, every hope ever abandoned, every child ever lost, every prayer that went unanswered, compressed into a single endless note of hunger. It struck the fleet like a physical wave. Blood streamed from noses. Light panels exploded in showers of sparks. The Eternal's hull groaned as though the ship itself had been punched in the ribs. Elias was thrown to the deck. His crucifix snapped free of his collar and skittered across the plating. He lunged after it on instinct, fingers closing around the small silver shape. Just as the lights died completely, darkness, absolute, the kind that had never existed inside a starship before. Then, softly, the golden city ahead began to sing. It was the lullaby again, 8 notes. Slow and perfect, rising from every spire. The scream faltered, confused, like a predator that had expected easy prey and found something with teeth. Emergency red strips flickered back to life along the deck. Elias hauled himself upright. His ears rang. Half the bridge crew was on their knees, hands pressed to bleeding faces. Aya's voice cut through the chaos, hoarse but unbroken. "Captain, hull integrity holding. Whatever that was, it didn't breach us. But the gate," she pointed at the rear viewport, "the wound they had entered through was knitting itself shut, violet fire folding inward. Black fingers, no tendrils, thick as moons, writhed inside the closing seam, clawing for purchase. One brushed the rearmost arc, the little colony ship Dawn's Promise. The vessel simply ceased. No explosion, no debris. Just a sudden, perfect sphere of nothing where 40,000 people had been praying a heartbeat earlier. Elias felt the loss like a blade between the ribs. Full burn. He roared, "Get us inside that city now." Engines that had been politely idling roared awake. The fleet surged forward as one terrified animal, shields flaring white under the pressure. The golden doorway at the city's heart widened, patient, unafraid. Another tendril lashed out. This time Elias saw it coming. He slammed the emergency override. Fleet pattern Delta 7 break and roll. 400 ships scattered in a maneuver, drilled 1,000 times for asteroid fields and pirate ambushes. The tendril carved empty void where they had been, then recoiled as though burned by the lullaby still pouring from the city. 30 seconds to safety. 20. A child's voice suddenly filled every speaker clear. Frightened but steady. "Daddy, the stars are crying." Elias's blood turned to ice. That was his daughter, Mira. She was supposed to be in the protected core of the Eternal with her mother. 3 decks down, behind 3 meters of armor. He hit the nearest comm panel. "Mira, baby, where are you?" The lights flickered again, gentler this time. The golden song swelled, wrapping the fleet like arms. 10 seconds. The tendril gathered itself for one last strike, coiling into a spear of pure night aimed straight at the Eternal's heart. Elias didn't think. He simply stepped in front of the main viewport, raised the little silver crucifix in his fist, and spoke, not shouted. Spoke the words his mother had whispered over him every night of his childhood. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." The spear lunged, and the city answered. A single beam of light, no, not light. Something older shot from the open-hand doorway. It was soft gold, the color of sunrise on Earth before everything went dark. Where it touched the spear of night, darkness unraveled like burnt paper. The scream became a whimper, then silence. The gate sealed with a sound like a mother closing a door against the cold. The fleet crossed the threshold. Gravity shifted, not violently, but the way it does when a ship finally slides into dock after years at sea. Engines cut out on their own. Inertia dampeners sighed into standby. For one impossible moment, every person aboard felt weightless in more ways than physics allowed. Then the golden light folded around them, warm as breath, and the city opened. They did not dock. There were no clamps, no umbilicals. The ships simply settled into crystalline cradles that grew to meet them, as though the city had been waiting with open hands since before the first human learned to walk upright. Elias stood on the bridge, chest heaving, staring out at wonders no sensor could name. Spires of living light rose and fell like breathing. Bridges of frozen music arced between them. In the distance, continents of cloud drifted above oceans of liquid starlight. And everywhere were footprints, human footprints, bare. Feet, boots, tiny toddler prints, pressed into crystal that should have been too hard for any impression. Millions of them, leading deeper into the city like breadcrumbs left by children who knew their parents would follow. Aya's voice was barely a whisper. "Captain." "We're home," he couldn't answer. His throat was full of salt. The main screen lit again, gentle gold letters forming without source. "Come, your galaxy is waiting." Elias found his voice. "Away teams, full bioprotocol, sidearms hot, hearts open. We're guests here, not conquerors." He was first down the ramp. The air that met him was sweet like rain on summer pavement, like bread baking, like his wife's hair the morning Mira was born. It filled his lungs and, for the first time in years, breathing didn't hurt. His boots touched crystal that sang under his weight. The footprints glowed faintly where he stepped, as though recognizing him. Behind him, the ramp filled with people Marines. In armor, mothers carrying infants, old men clutching photographs, a rabbi and an imam walking side by side. No one spoke. They simply followed the prince. They walked for what felt like hours and might have been minutes. Distance behaved differently here. The city adjusted to the pace of the slowest child. Eventually the footprints led to an amphitheater, vast enough to hold every survivor 10 times over. At its center stood a single tree, not a metaphor, a tree. Real bark, real leaves that rustled without wind. Its trunk was the width of a skyscraper, roots plunging into starlight. Fruit glowed softly gold, silver, deep living green, like someone had captured constellations and taught them to grow. And beneath it waited a man. He wore simple robes the color of twilight, skin like polished bronze, eyes older than galaxies, and a smile that held every kindness humanity had ever forgotten it was capable of. He raised one hand in greeting. Elias felt every Marine behind him snap to parade rest without orders. Rifles lowered. Tears started falling, and no one bothered to hide them. The man spoke, and the words arrived in whatever language your heart had learned first. Welcome home, Elias Juno Reiss. Welcome home, children of a wandering star. Elias found himself 10 paces forward without remembering the steps. His voice cracked like a boy's. Who are you? The man's smile deepened, sad and proud at once. I am the gardener. You may call me father, if you wish. Or friend. Names are less important than recognition. He gestured to the tree. Your galaxy is grafted here. Dying, yes, but not dead. Roots can be saved if the heart returns quickly enough. Elias looked up. Through the leaves he could see, impossibly, the Milky Way itself, suspended like a spiral of smoke inside. A crystal sphere no larger than his fist, yet perfect in every arm, every nebula. Stars that had gone dark flickered weakly, waiting. How long do we have? He asked out, the gardener's eyes filled with something too vast for sorrow. Not long. The dark you felt at the gate is older than silence. It learned your absence and grew bold. It will devour everything that remembers your name unless the song is renewed. Elias swallowed. What song? The gardener placed a hand over Elias's heart. Warmth spread through his chest like sunrise, the one you have been singing since the first fire was kindled in a cave. The one that taught stars how to shine. Love, stubborn and stupid and brave. You call it many things, faith, hope, defiance. We simply call it humanity. He stepped aside, revealing a path that led straight into the trunk of the tree. Light poured from the opening, carrying the scent of earth, oceans, and pine forests, and his mother's kitchen on Christmas morning. Walk through, the gardener said softly. Bring them home. Every soul you save kindles a star. But know this, some doors only open from the inside. Your people must choose to return, freely, or the dark wins forever. Elias stared into the light and saw far away, soul-flickering Earth's sun, his sun almost gone. He turned back to his people. 3 billion faces carried in his chest. He raised the crucifix, kissed it once, and tucked it inside his uniform again. Then Captain Elias Juno Reiss, son of a dead world, father of a little girl who was somewhere. Behind him, clutching her mother's hand, took the first step toward the tree. Behind him, the fleet followed without hesitation, a river of footsteps lighting the crystal like a sunrise made of people. And in the closing darkness far away, something that had no name realized the prey had slipped its grasp and began to hunt in earnest. The tree swallowed them whole. There was no other way to describe it. One moment Elias stood on crystal ground with 3 billion souls streaming behind him in perfect silence. The next, the bark folded around him like warm water, and he was falling upward into light. He landed on grass, real grass. The kind that smelled of rain and crushed green and childhood summers he had never actually lived, because he was born on Luna. His palms pressed into it, and the blades bent, releasing that impossible scent. He laughed one short, broken sound, because the universe had just handed him a miracle wrapped in the ordinary. Then he looked up. He stood in a valley under a sky that held 2 suns, one gold, one gentle rose. The Milky Way arched overhead, not a photograph, not a simulation, but alive, breathing. Its spiral arms turning so slowly he could feel the motion in his bones. Every star that had gone dark was a black wound in that tapestry, bleeding shadow into the glow. Around him, people arrived in waves, tumbling gently onto the grass, gasping, weeping, staring at hands that suddenly remembered how soil felt. Children ran in circles just because they could. An old man fell to his knees and kissed the ground like a penitent returning to Mecca. A young Marine dropped her rifle and hugged the nearest stranger, armor and all. Elias searched the faces until he found them. His wife, Lena, hair wild, eyes shining, clutching Mira against her hip. His daughter's face was streaked with tears and wonder. "Daddy!" Mira broke free and sprinted. She hit him like a comet, arms around his neck, legs locked at his waist. She weighed nothing and everything. He buried his face in her hair and breathed her in baby shampoo and fear and hope. Lena reached them a heartbeat later, and for a long moment, the three of them simply stood in the grass, holding on as though gravity might change its mind. When he finally lifted his head, the gardener was waiting at the edge of the valley, patient as mountains. Elias set Mira down but kept her hand. Lena's fingers found his other. Together they walked. The valley rose into hills carpeted with wildflowers that chimed softly when the wind touched them. Rivers of liquid starlight wound between the hills, and on every bank stood trees, smaller cousins of the one they had entered, each bearing fruit that glowed with captured nebulae. But the beauty was marred. Here and there, patches of grass had turned to ash. Trees stood skeletal, leaves falling upward into the sky and vanishing like smoke. Where the darkness had taken hold, the ground was cold, and the air tasted of endings. The gardener stopped at the crest of the highest hill. Below them stretched the entire galaxy, not a model, not a hologram, but the real thing, folded gently into this pocket of creation so that a man could stand on a hill and see the Orion spur at his feet, and the galactic core resting on the horizon like a second sunrise. "Behold, your home," the gardener said quietly, "suspended between heartbeats. Every star you rekindle buys it one more day." Elias's mouth went dry. "How?" The gardener knelt and pressed his palm to the grass. A single blade grew beneath his hand, brightened, then lifted free, a tiny green star that floated upward and settled into the great spiral above. Where it touched, a dead patch of sky blazed back to life. "Memory," he said. "Love remembered is light restored. But memory must be carried by a living soul who chooses to return. The dark cannot follow where love has been freely given." He rose. "Your people are scattered across these lands, each in the place their heart most needed to see again. Some walk the streets of drowned Manhattan. Some sit under the cherry trees of a Kyoto that never burned. Some kneel in the dust of Mars and forgive it for taking their children. They must choose to leave those places and walk back to the tree. Only then can they bring the light home." Elias looked out over the impossible country. In the distance he saw the golden spires of New Beijing rising from purple rice fields. Closer, a replica of the Western Wall stood whole again, Jews and Muslims praying shoulder to shoulder. A little girl chased fireflies that were actually miniature pulsars. "And if they refuse?" Lena asked, voice trembling. The gardener's eyes were ancient and kind. "Then those stars stay dark forever. And the people who stay remain here, safe, loved. But the galaxy dies, and with it every story that was still waiting to be told." Mira tugged Elias's hand. "Daddy, I saw Grandma's house. She was making cookies. She said to tell you the oven timer is broken, and you have to come fix it." Elias felt his heart crack cleanly in two. He looked at the gardener. "How long do we have?" "Until the last fruit falls from the great tree. When the bough is bare, the door closes." Above them, a single golden fruit detached and drifted down like a slow-motion meteor. It landed in the gardener's palm, warm and pulsing. "One soul," he said, offering it to Elias. "One memory. One star." Elias took it. The fruit was heavier than a planet. He closed his fist around it and felt the warmth spread up his arm, into his chest, behind his eyes. A memory surfaced unbidden: his mother on Titan, the day the reactors failed, pressing the crucifix into his hand and whispering, "Carry this for me, baby." I'll be waiting on the other side of morning." He opened his eyes. Tears blurred the galaxy. "I'll start," he said. The gardener smiled. Proud and heartbroken at once, Elias turned to the crowd gathering on the hillside, thousands now. Hundreds of thousands, word spreading faster than light. He climbed onto a boulder so they could see him. "Listen to me." His voice carried without shouting, the way it did in dreams. "This place is mercy. It is every good thing we ever lost, handed back to us for one more embrace. But it is not the end of the road. Out there," he pointed to the wounded sky, "our galaxy is bleeding to death because we left it. Every star that goes dark is a world that will never again know dawn. Every nebula that fades is a cradle that will stay empty. We were never just passengers on those rocks. We were the reason they burned. I am asking you, no, I am begging you to leave paradise and walk back into the fire. Take the memory of every person you ever loved, every song you ever sang, every stupid fight and every forgiven sin, and carry it home. Because if we don't, there will be no more home for anyone." Silence. Absolute. Then, an old woman in the front row, someone's grandmother from the Martian ghettos, stepped forward. She was missing 3 fingers from a mining accident, and her eyes were filmed with cataracts. But she looked at Elias like he was the child. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny red paper crane. "Creased 1,000 times. This is from my granddaughter," she said, voice steady. "She folded it the day the sky cracked. I promised I'd bring it back to her garden on Earth. Earth is gone. But the promise isn't." She walked past Elias, straight to the gardener, and placed the crane in his hand. The gardener closed his fingers. The paper ignited, not burned. Ignited, becoming a red dwarf star that rose and slotted perfectly into an empty place in the Scutum Centaurus arm. Light bloomed across half the horizon, one by one, then in tens, then in thousands. People stepped forward. A boy gave up the last photograph of his dog. A soldier surrendered the memory of his first kiss under alien suns. A rabbi sang the Shema and let the final note become Polaris. Each offering became a star. Elias watched the galaxy heal in real time, wounds closing, arms brightening. But the darkness still held huge swaths, whole sectors black as ink. He looked down at the fruit in his hand. His mother's face smiled behind his eyes. He knelt so Mira could see. "Sweetheart," he said softly, "Daddy has to go put Grandma's light back. That means I have to leave for a little while." Mira's lip trembled, but she nodded, the bravest thing a 7-year-old had ever done. Lena kissed him, hard and fierce. "Bring our sky back, Elias Juno Reiss, then come find us." He pressed the fruit to his heart. It sank into his chest like it had always belonged there. Light poured out of him, gold, white, impossible. When it faded, he stood in his uniform again, crucifix warm against his skin. And the hillside was empty, except for the gardener. Far away, across the healing galaxy, something ancient and hungry woke fully. It had tasted the edges of this place once. Now it scented blood and memory and love. It began to move. Elias turned to the gardener. "Time to go to work," he said. The gardener's smile was sharp as sunrise. "Walk the roads between the stars. Captain, where you place your foot, darkness cannot follow. But hurry. The last fruit falls at the final trumpet." He pointed to a path of starlight that had not been there moments before. Leading straight into the heart of the Milky Way, Elias took the first step. Behind him, the great tree shuddered, and another fruit smaller, flickering, detached and began its long fall. And somewhere in the dark between galaxies, the hunter that had no name opened eyes older than time and began to follow the footprints of a single man walking home through the void. Elias walked alone, the path of starlight held beneath, his boots like packed snow that never melted. Each step rang with a clear bell-like note, and wherever the sound touched, darkness peeled back like burnt film. He was inside the galaxy now, truly inside it, the way a thought lives inside a skull. The spiral arms rose around him as vast cathedral walls of fire and diamond dust. Nebulae drifted overhead like slow storms of birth and death. He had expected silence. Instead, the stars were singing, not metaphor, actual voices, billions of them, layered into chords that hurt the heart with their beauty. Some were human fragments of lullabies, wedding vows, last words spoken on dying moons. Others were older, alien, the songs of species that had risen and fallen before mitochondria learned to dance. All of them braided together into one long, aching question. Where did you go? Elias walked faster. The crucifix at his throat burned warm, pulsing in time with his heart. He could feel the fruit memory his mother had become lodged behind his sternum, a second heartbeat of light. Every step carried it closer to Sol, to the place where her star had once burned. But the darkness was learning. It pooled in the spaces between stars, thickening into rivers, then oceans. Where it touched the path, the starlight dimmed and cracked. Elias felt it watching him, patient, curious, ravenous. It had no shape he could name, only the weight of endless appetite. He crested a ridge of frozen hydrogen and looked down into the Orion spur. What he saw stopped him cold. Earth. Was there not a memory? Not a ghost. The real planet, blue, white, heartbreakingly alive, hung in the void like a jewel on black velvet. Continents he had only seen in photographs drifted beneath perfect clouds. The moon circled it, pocked and familiar. And Sol burned golden and steady, the way it had the day humanity first looked up and decided the sky was not the limit. For one impossible moment, Elias forgot how to breathe. Then he saw the chains. Black, tendrils thicker than continents wrapped Earth from pole to pole, sinking into oceans, coiling around mountains. They pulsed slowly, drinking. Where they touched, the blue faded to ash. Cities that had been rebuilt in this sacred place crumbled again, brick by brick. The moon cracked along old fracture lines, and on the night side, millions of tiny lights, human souls who had chosen to stay, flickered like candles in wind. The darkness was feeding on their refusal to leave. Elias felt rage rise in him, so pure it tasted. Metallic. He started running. The path slanted downward, gravity bending to meet his need. Stars blurred past. He passed through the Eagle Nebula and felt newborn suns kiss his cheeks with infant fire. He vaulted the Carina pillars and heard the ghosts of extinct civilizations applaud. Every stride covered light years. He hit the heliopause of Sol at a dead sprint and did not slow. Earth swelled before him, enormous and wounded. The chains sensed him coming and reared back like serpents. Elias drew the only weapon he had left. He pressed both palms to his chest, over the glowing fruit, and spoke the words his mother had died whispering. Into your hands I commend my spirit. Light exploded out of him. It was not gentle. It was not kind. It was the fury of every parent who ever lost a child, every lover parted by war, every prayer screamed into vacuum and answered with silence. It poured from Elias in a column wide enough to swallow moons. Where it struck the chains, darkness shrieked and boiled away. Continents blazed green again. Oceans caught fire with reflected sunlight. The moon healed with a sound like glaciers calving in reverse. Earth spun beneath him, suddenly, fiercely alive, but the darkness did not flee. It gathered. From the far side of the planet, it rose a single shape now, no longer pretending to be tendrils. A thing of angles that hurt to perceive, wings made of the concept of endings, eyes that were graves. It opened a mouth that was the absence of mouths and spoke with the voice of every doubt humanity had ever carried. You cannot win. You are finite. I am all that remains. When finite is done. Elias floated in high orbit. Arms spread, light still pouring from his chest. Blood streamed from his eyes, his ears, the corners of his mouth. The crucifix had melted into his skin, leaving a brand shaped like hope. He smiled. It hurt, "You're wrong," he said, and his voice carried to every corner of the system. "We were never fighting to win. We were fighting to be worth saving." He looked past the monster to Earth below. On the surface, people were looking up, billions of them. Faces he would never meet, lives he would never know. Some waved, some knelt. A little girl in what used to be Kansas raised both arms toward the sky and shouted something he felt more than heard. "Daddy!" Whether she meant him or someone greater, it didn't matter. Elias gathered the last of the light, his mother's light, Mira's laugh, Lena's kiss. Every stubborn heartbeat humanity had ever managed, and shaped it into a spear. "Not luck," he whispered. "Someone wanted us to live." He threw it. The spear crossed the distance between heartbeats. It struck the darkness dead center and kept going, dragging the thing with it. Out past lunar orbit, past the heliopause, into the deep black between stars where no light had ever shone. For one perfect second, everything was silent, then soul flared, truly flared. A second sunrise that bathed the entire system in gold. Every chain shattered into glittering dust. Earth spun free, singing. Elias hung in the sudden quiet, empty, spent. "Human." The gardener's voice reached him, soft as forgiveness. "Well done, good and faithful servant." Gravity remembered him. He began to fall, but arms caught him, millions of them, translucent and warm, made of the same light he had just spent. Human arms. Arms that had once built pyramids and cathedrals, written symphonies and suicide notes, held dying friends and newborn daughters. They cradled him gently and carried him down through atmosphere that smelled of rain coming. He landed in a field of wheat that stretched to every horizon. The sky above was blue, cloudless, perfect. A breeze moved the stalks like an ocean. In the distance he could see the curve of the planet, and beyond it, the moon, whole again. People were walking toward him across the wheat, his people, the ones who had chosen to return. Their footsteps left trails of fireflies that rose and became new stars. Lena reached him first. Mira was riding on her hip, arms outstretched. Elias tried to stand and failed. His legs wouldn't hold him. He had nothing left. Lena knelt, tears cutting clean paths through the dust on her cheeks. "You came back," she whispered. "I promised." He CROKED. Mira touched his face with small, careful fingers. "The stars are shining again. Daddy, all of them." He looked up. The Milky Way blazed overhead. No wounds, no empty patches. Just the full, furious glory of 10 billion years of creation, doing what it was always meant to do. And every star was looking back. They spelled something across the night. Slow and deliberate, the way lighthouses once spoke to ships in storm. The message took minutes to form. Patient and vast. "Thank you." Elias laughed until he cried, or maybe cried until he laughed. He wasn't sure where one ended and the other began. Lena helped him stand. Together they turned toward the horizon, where the great tree waited, roots drinking from Earth's reborn oceans, branches heavy with fruit that had not yet fallen. There was still work to do. Whole sectors waited for their people to come home. Billions more footsteps to place where darkness had tried to root. But for now, Elias Juno Reiss stood on soil that remembered him, held by the two hearts that had kept him sane across a dying universe, and felt the quiet, vast intelligence behind all things, breathe a sigh of relief so deep it stirred the wheat for 1,000 miles, somewhere beyond the galactic rim. The thing that had hunted them licked its wounds in the outer dark. It was patient. It had tasted love once, and found its sharp. It would wait until the light grew tired, but humanity had just remembered what it was made of, and the stars, newly kindled, began to sing a new verse. One the darkness had never learned the words to. The wheat field lasted only one night. Elias woke before dawn to find the horizon folding in on itself like burning paper. The golden sky bled violet at the edges, and the air tasted of ozone and endings. Lena was already up, Mira asleep against her shoulder. Without a word they understood. The respite was over. The tree was calling its wanderers home. Across the reborn earth, the same thing happened in a million places at once. Farmers in the Ukraine looked up from coffee to see wheat turning translucent. Children in the ruins of Tokyo watched cherry blossoms dissolve into sparks that rose and became new stars. A lone monk on a Himalayan peak felt the mountain beneath him sigh and begin to fade. The gardener's voice moved through every mind. Like warm water. The first harvest is complete. The second must be willing. Elias kissed his daughter's forehead, tasted salt and sleep, and stood. The crucifix branded into his chest glowed softly, his mother's light, now part of him forever. Lena met his eyes. "Go," she said. "We'll be right behind you." He walked. The path of starlight had returned, brighter now, a river of white fire cutting across the sky. It began at the great tree whose roots drank from the Pacific and whose crown brushed the edge of Andromeda. Billions were already on it, lines of people stretching from horizon to horizon, carrying memories like lanterns. Elias joined the flow. They walked in silence at first. Then someone began to sing an old earth hymn, voice cracking. Another joined, then thousands. Languages braided together until the song had no edges. It rose above the galaxy like incense, where their feet touched the path. Darkness that had tried to creep back and withered and blew away, hours or centuries. Later time was negotiable again. Elias found himself at the head of the column, walking beside a man he recognized from the fleet manifests, Rabbi Avi Cohen. Once of the Ark, Jerusalem's hope, the rabbi's beard was streaked with starlight now. His eyes ancient and unafraid. "You look like Moses leading the people out of Egypt," the rabbi said. Voice rough with wonder, Elias shook his head. "Moses had a staff and a direct line to God. I've got a melted crucifix and a bad knee." The rabbi laughed, the sound bright as breaking glass. "Same thing, my friend. Same thing." They crested the final ridge together. Below them lay the galactic core, not the violent furnace of black holes and radiation humanity had once mapped, but a garden. A literal garden. Trees of plasma grew in orderly rows, their leaves supernova that bloomed and faded in gentle cycles. Rivers of dark matter flowed between them, carrying seeds of possibility. At the center stood the tree of trees, vast beyond comprehension. Its trunk the width of a spiral arm, its fruit entire star clusters, and it was dying, not from the darkness. Outside humanity had driven that back for now, but from within. Branches sagged under the weight of unchosen fruit. Leaves fell upward and winked out before they reached the sky. The song of the stars had become a dirge. The gardener waited beneath the lowest bough. His face, once calm as dawn, was lined with grief. "Half the harvest refuses," he said without greeting. "They have tasted paradise and will not leave it. They say the galaxy had its chance, that humanity deserves rest." Elias felt the words like a slap. "Where are they?" The gardener pointed to a single branch, heavy with fruit that pulsed weakly. "There, a pocket reality of their own making. They call it the quiet garden. No pain, no loss, no darkness, only what they loved most forever." He met Elias's eyes. "They are not wrong to want peace, but peace bought with abandonment is not peace. It is suicide in slow motion." Elias stared at the branch. He could feel them inside 3 billion souls curled around memories like blankets. He could hear faint laughter, the sound of children playing forever, 7 years old. Lovers who would never age, parents who would never bury their young. His fists clenched. "I'll go in and drag them out if I have to." The gardener's smile was sad. "You cannot drag a soul anywhere, Elias. You can only invite." He reached up and plucked a single fruit, small, bruised, flickering. "This one is almost ready to fall." If it does before the branch is empty, the quiet garden seals forever. And the core dies. He placed it in Elias's hand. It weighed more than grief. Take this to them. Let them see what their rest is costing. Elias closed his fingers around the fruit. It pulsed once, weakly, like a failing heart. He stepped onto the branch. The world flipped. Suddenly, he stood in a meadow at twilight, the kind Earth had not seen for centuries. Fireflies drifted. A porch swing creaked. Somewhere a dog barked joyfully. The air smelled of cut grass and barbecue and safety. People sat on blankets, laughing, telling stories. Children chased each other through knee-high grass that would never need mowing. An old couple danced slowly to music only they could hear. They were happy. Elias felt something inside. Him tear. A woman noticed him first. Captain Amrita Singh. Once commander of the Ark Jandi's Reem. She had died in his arms during the evacuation of Viga, shrapnel in her lungs. Whispering to him to tell her wife she was sorry for missing their anniversary. She was whole now. Young again. Her wife sat beside her, head on her shoulder. Elias? Amrita's voice was soft, wondering. You came to join us? He couldn't speak. She stood, walked over, touched his face like a mother checking for fever. You look exhausted, my friend. Sit, rest, there's room. He found his voice. Amrita, the core is dying. The tree is dying. We have to come back. She smiled, and it broke his heart. We are back, Elias. This is what we fought for. No more running. No more watching children die of radiation sickness. No more choosing who gets the last seat on the shuttle. She gestured at the meadow. Here, no one is left behind, ever. He held up the bruised fruit. It flickered between them like a candle in wind. This falls, he said, and the door closes, forever. The galaxy dies. Everything we ever built, everything we ever hoped to build gone. A ripple went through the crowd. Some looked away. Some met his eyes with pity. A boy stepped forward, maybe 12, freckles across his nose. Elias recognized him from the memorial walls. Jamie Park, lost when the mercy of saints vanished. He held a baseball glove that would never wear out. Captain, the boy said, voice steady. My mom's here. She's teaching me how to throw a curveball. She never got to before. I'm not leaving her again. Elias felt his knees want to buckle. He looked at the hundreds of thousands, no, millions, gathered under the endless twilight. At the peace they had earned with blood and fire, and centuries of grief. He did the only thing he could think of. He knelt in the grass, right there in front of them all, and began to pray. Not the polished words of chapels. The raw, ugly prayer of a man who had nothing left but truth. God, he said, voice breaking, I'm tired. I'm so damn tired. I've carried them as far as my legs will go. If this is the end, then take us. But please, please don't. Let it be because we gave up. Silence stopped then. Jamie Park, the boy who had died, screaming in vacuum, walked over and put a small hand on Elias's shoulder. I'll come, he said quietly. Mom'll understand. She always said the needs of the many. His voice cracked. He was 12. He shouldn't have to finish that sentence, but he did. One by one, others stood. Not all. Not even most. But enough. They formed a line behind the boy, hands linked. Eyes bright with tears they refused to let fall. Amrita kissed her wife one last time, long, slow, like she was memorizing the shape of forever, and joined them. The bruised fruit in Elias's hand flared. Suddenly strong, they walked behind them. The quiet garden began to dim. Porch lights winked out. Fireflies fell like sparks from a dying fire. Ahead, the branch waited, real branches now, of wood and leaf and starlight. Elias stepped off last, carrying the light of every soul who had chosen the harder road. The branch shuddered as the final foot left it. With a sound like a heart breaking, The quiet garden folded in on itself and vanished. 3 billion souls had stayed. 3,000,000,001 had returned. The gardener was waiting. He did not speak. He simply opened his arms. Elias fell into them and wept like a child. Above them, the great tree straightened. New leaves unfurled, bright, fierce, defiant, but in the outer dark, far beyond the galactic rim, something ancient stirred again. That it had tasted refusal, that had learned a new hunger, and it began to sing a counter-melody, one that promised the quiet garden could be rebuilt. Larger, eternal. If only they would open the door one more time. The war for humanity's soul had only just begun. Not sap, but light, thin golden streams running down the vast trunk, pooling at the roots, then sinking into the crystal ground like tears returning to the earth. Every drop was a soul that had chosen the quiet garden. Every drop dimmed a star somewhere in the spiral. Elias stood beneath the lowest bough, head bowed, fists clenched so hard his nails cut half-moons into his palms. The gardener stood beside him, silent now, the sorrow in his eyes deeper than oceans. 3,000,000,001 had come back. 3 billion had not. That was victory. Technically. Enough light to keep the core alive. Enough song to hold the darkness at bay for now. But Elias felt the loss like a limb torn away. He could name 100 of the ones who stayed. 1,000. 10,000. Every face he had ever saluted. Every child he had carried aboard an evacuation shuttle. Every voice that had called him captain across crackling cums while their ships burned. They were gone. Not dead, worse than dead. Comfortable. He wanted to scream at the sky. Instead he whispered the only question that mattered. Why wasn't it enough? The gardener placed a hand on his shoulder. The touch was warm, ancient, unbearably kind, because love that can be taken is not yet love perfected. And free will is the sharpest blade I ever forged. Elias looked up. The great tree's crown was still heavy with unplucked fruit, fewer now, but each one brighter, pulsing with the fierce light of people who had looked paradise in the face and walked away from it. He straightened. Then we finish what we started. The gardener's smile was small, proud, terrible. There is one more road. He gestured, and the crystal ground opened, not violently, but the way a flower opens to dawn. A spiral staircase of starlight descended into darkness that did not feel empty. It felt watchful. The outer dark, the gardener said quietly. The place where the first refusal happened. Before galaxies. Before light learned to speak. That is where the countersong is strongest now. It sings to the ones who stayed, promising them a garden without cost. If it persuades even one more soul to turn back. He did not finish. He did not need to. Elias looked at the staircase. It went down forever. I'll need a team, he said. The gardener shook his head. This road only one living soul may walk. The rest must hold the tree, because when you descend, the darkness will come for the heart of everything. Elias felt the old, familiar cold settle in his gut, the same cold that had lived there since soul went dark. He welcomed it now. It meant he was still able to fight. He knelt, pressed his forehead to the crystal, and prayed the shortest prayer of his life. Not my will, yours. When he stood, the gardener was holding something, a single fruit. Smaller than the others, no larger than a heart. It shone with every color Elias had ever loved his daughter's eyes, Lena's hair in sunlight, the blue of old earth oceans. This is the last fruit, the gardener said. The one that must not fall until every willing soul is home. Guard it with your life. Plant it only when you hear the trumpet. Elias took it. It beat against his palm like a bird. He kissed the gardener's cheek rough, with starlight and sorrow, and stepped onto the staircase. Crystal closed above him. Darkness swallowed him. Whole, he fell for a long time. Or rose. Direction had no meaning here. There was only pressure and cold, and the sense of something enormous turning its attention toward him. The staircase ended on nothing. He stood on a plane of black glass, beneath a sky that had never known stars. The air was thick with the smell of rust and old blood. In the distance, shapes moved vast, slow, patient. They had no names because names were a kindness they had rejected. Long ago, when detached itself and drifted closer. It was beautiful in the way an open grave is beautiful, where it passed. The glass cracked and bled shadows. It stopped an arm's length away and regarded Elias with eyes that were the memory of eyes. "You return," it whispered, and the words tasted like betrayal. "You who were offered peace and chose pain." W.A. Elias felt the fruit pulse against his ribs. He had tucked it inside his uniform, next to the brand of the crucifix. "Because peace that costs someone else's future isn't peace," he said. His voice did not echo. The dark drank sound. "It's cowardice wearing a better name." The thing tilted its head. "Curious, we can give them the quiet garden again. Larger, eternal. Nitrogen monoxide tears, nitrogen monoxide choice, nitrogen monoxide loss. Only what they loved. Forever." Elias felt the pull of it. God, he felt it. He saw Lena laughing on that porch swing. Mira forever 7, chasing fireflies that never dimmed. His mother baking cookies in a kitchen that never ran out of flour. He took one step forward. Thing opened its arms. Elias took another step. Fruit burned against his heart like a coal. Yikunged against his heart like a coal. "Stopped." "No," he said. Single word cracked the plane beneath his feet. Light thin, defiant leaked from the fracture. The thing recoiled as though struck. Elias reached into his uniform and drew out the fruit. It blazed now, too bright to look at directly. "You offered them a lie wrapped in mercy," he said. "I'm offering the truth wrapped in hope. And hope hurts. Hope costs. Hope leaves scars. But hope is the only thing that ever beat you." He held the fruit high. In the distance, across impossible gulfs, he felt the great tree shudder. He felt 3,000,000,001 souls who had chosen the harder road turn their faces toward him. He felt Lena's hand on Mira's shoulder, both of them praying with everything they had. The darkness gathered itself, towering. Furious. Elias smiled. He had never felt less alone. He took the fruit in both hands and broke it open. Light poured out, not gentle, not kind, but the fierce, cleansing light of creation's first morning. It rolled across the plain like a tsunami of dawn. Where it touched the black glass, grass erupted. Flowers no eye had ever seen unfurled. Rivers of living water carved channels through stone. The darkness screamed, a sound that would have shattered worlds. If worlds had still existed here. Elias stood in the heart of the light and sang. Not words. Just the raw sound of a human soul refusing to surrender. The same sound that had once echoed in caves when fire was new. The same sound that had launched ships into the dark. The same sound his daughter made when she laughed at nightmares. The darkness broke against it like waves against a cliff. And somewhere, impossibly far and yet close enough to touch, Elias heard an answer. A trumpet. Not brassy, not martial. A single perfect note blown on an instrument carved from the first light and the last dark. It rolled across the void and struck the darkness like a hammer on an anvil. The thing before him unraveled, screaming, into threads of night that fled whimpering. The trumpet sounded again. Elias felt himself lifted, caught up in arms of fire and wind. He rose through layers of creation he had no names for. Past the roots of the great tree, past the healing galaxy, past wonder and terror and grief, until he stood once more beneath the bough where the gardener waited. Only now the gardener was not alone. Arrayed behind him, in perfect silence, stood every soul who had returned. Billions of them, shining like an honor guard made of dawn. Lena stepped forward, Mira in her arms. She did not speak. She simply placed their daughter in Elias's arms and kissed him like the world was ending and beginning at once. The gardener raised his hand in the distance. The final fruit, small, perfect, blazing, detached from the highest branch and began its slow fall. Elias looked at the host behind him, at the galaxy blazing overhead, whole again, at the darkness fleeing beyond the rim, wounded but not dead. He took one step forward and caught the fruit. Before it touched the ground, light exploded outward in a perfect sphere. When it cleared, the great tree was gone. In its place stood Earth, real Earth, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. One moon, soul burning steady above it all. And every star in the Milky Way looked down and blinked. Once, in perfect unison, the message was simple: we are home, but beyond the galactic edge. Something ancient and patient closed its wounds and began to count heartbeats until the light grew tired again. The war was not over. It had only changed shape. And Elias Juno Reiss, standing on a hillside in real grass with his wife and daughter and 3 billion stubborn, impossible survivors, looked up at the sky and smiled, the smile of a man who had stared into the abyss and taught it anew. Word. They buried the gardener at dawn. There was no body, only a single white robe, folded neatly on the grass where he had last stood, smelling faintly of bread and turned earth. Elias carried it himself to the hill above what had once been Jerusalem and would be again. Rabbi Avi Cohen spoke the Kaddish. An imam from the old Lagos Ark recited Al-Fatiha. A Buddhist nun struck a small bell 9 times. A little girl from Ganymede, who had never seen a real sunrise, laid a single white flower on the robe and whispered, "Thank you for the sky." Then the wind took the robe, lifted it like a sail, and it was gone. Earth was whole. But not the earth they had left. Continents had shifted into gentler shapes. Old scars, Chernobyl, Hiroshima, the dried Aral Sea were gone, as though the planet had been allowed to dream itself healed. The moon hung low and silver, its face unmarked by the mining scars of the Exodus years. And in the night sky, the Milky Way burned so fiercely that cities needed no lamps, yet every adult carried the same hollow place behind the eyes. 3 billion souls had chosen the quiet garden, and were lost to them forever. Elias felt it like a constant ache beneath the ribs. He woke before sunrise every morning, walked to the hill, and stared at the stars until Lena found him and led him home without a word. Mira asked once why Daddy cried at the sky. Lena told her the sky was beautiful, and Daddy was remembering how close they had come to never seeing it again. That was enough for a 7-year-old. On the 40th day, the trumpet sounded again, not the great trumpet of the void, but a single clear note, human-made, bronze in breath, blown from the watchtower of the new settlement at Everest Base Camp. The signal they had all agreed on. The darkness was moving. They saw it first as a dimming along the galactic rim, a thin black line creeping inward like frost on glass. Sensors, crude things hammered together from arc parts, confirmed what every heart already knew. The thing that had no name was returning, patient as entropy, hungry as grief. Elias stood on the hill with the fleet's surviving captains. Aya Lin, gray now at the temples. Father Ortiz, thinner, eyes bright with unspent absolution. Rabbi Cohen, beard blowing in the Himalayan wind. They looked at the creeping line of darkness and did not flinch. "We beat it once," Aya said quietly. "We wounded it," Elias corrected. "There's a difference." Father Ortiz crossed himself. "Then we wound it again, and again, until it learns the cost of touching what is loved." Elias looked at the sky and felt the old weight settle on his shoulders, not crushing this time, but familiar like a well-worn coat. He called the council that night. They met in the open air, beneath the full blaze of the galaxy. Every settlement sent representatives, some in person, some by hologram flickering above campfires. 3,000,000,001 voices carried on wind and light. Elias did not climb a stage. He simply stood in the circle of firelight and spoke. "We are home," he began. "We paid for this dirt with blood and fire and choices that will haunt us for the rest of our lives. And now the dark wants it back." Silence. Only the crackle of flames and the breathing of a reborn world. I will not lie to you. We are few. Our ships are scrap. Our weapons are museum pieces. We have no gate, no gardener, no miracles left in our pockets. He paused. Let that settle. But we have something it will never understand. We have each other. And we have a promise we made when we walked away from paradise, that no one gets left behind again. Not one child. Not one star. Not one stubborn, broken, beautiful soul. He looked around the circle, meeting eyes that had seen hell and chosen to walk deeper into it anyway. So here is the plan. We do not wait for it to come to us. We go to it. Every ship we can fly, every weapon we can forge, every song we still remember, we take the fight to the rim. We draw the line there, and we hold it. Not for glory, not even for survival. We hold it because someone has to stand up and tell the dark that love is not negotiable. A murmur rippled through the crowd, part fear, part fierce joy. A young woman stood, barely 20, prosthetic arm gleaming in the firelight. She had been born aboard the Ark Mercy of Saints, the one the darkness had swallowed at the gate. "My mother stayed," she said, voice steady. "She stayed so I could be here tonight. I'm going." One by one they rose, thousands, hundreds of thousands. A tide of raised hands and clenched fists. Elias felt his throat close. He raised his own hand, palm open toward the sky. "Then we build the fleet again. From scrap and hope and whatever scraps of grace God left lying around. We call her the last argument. And we launch at the next new moon." Cheers erupted raw. Ragged, human. Later, when the fires burned low and most had gone to prepare, Lena found him on the hill again. She carried 2 cups of real coffee beans grown in volcanic soil near Naples, traded across half a continent. A luxury no one had tasted in lifetimes. They sat in silence and watched the darkness creep a little closer. "Will we win?" she asked finally. Elias sipped the coffee. It tasted like forgiveness. "I don't know," he said. "But we're going to make it earn every inch." She leaned her head on his shoulder. Myra's voice drifted up from the house below, singing the lullaby the gate probe had carried across universes. Her small, clear notes rose into the night and were answered softly at first, then stronger by windows opening all across the valley. Mothers, fathers, grandparents, orphans, every voice that still knew the words joined in. The song rolled across the reborn earth like a tide, high above. The creeping line of darkness faltered. Just for a moment, just long enough. Elias closed his eyes and felt the crucifix, brand warm against his skin. He felt his mother's hand on his shoulder, though she was light years away in whatever peace she had earned. He felt every soul who had walked the harder road standing with him, shoulder to shoulder. He finished the coffee, stood, and offered Lena his hand. "Come on," he said. "We have a fleet to build, far beyond the rim." The thing that had no name listened to the song and remembered pain. It gathered itself, patient as winter, vast as grief, and for the first time in eternity, it felt something perilously close to fear, because humanity was coming. Humanity had learned that some things were worth fighting. For even when the math said you would lose, especially then, last argument was not beautiful. She was a patchwork Frankenstein of hull plates torn from 100 dead arcs, welded together by hands that had forgotten how to sleep. Her spine was the UN's Eternal's old keel, stripped to bone and rebuilt around a reactor that sang in a minor key no human engineer had ever intended. Her wings were solar sails stitched from the golden fabric of the great tree itself, threads the gardener had left behind in the grass the morning he vanished. When the sails caught starlight, they glowed like cathedral windows. She carried 3,000,000,001 souls, not in cryo, not in luxury. Every corridor was lined with bunks, every cargo bay a village. Children were born in her med bays while grandmothers died in her chapels, and both events were marked with the same quiet song. There was no room for waste, no margin for error, and no one complained. They had already chosen the harder road once. They could do it again. Elias stood on the bridge one last time before launch. The observation blister showed Earth below small, perfect, fierce. A blue marble wrapped in dawn. Continents glowed with the soft gold of cities rebuilding themselves from memory and hope. The moon watched like an old friend who had kept a vigil no one else could. Lena stood beside him, Mira asleep against her hip, thumb in mouth. The way she only did when she felt absolutely safe. Aya Lin's voice came from the helm. All stations report ready, Captain. Fleet reports 111 ships in formation. We are as ready as mortals get. Elias nodded. His throat was raw from speaking to crowds, from singing the lullaby until his voice cracked. From whispering goodbyes he prayed were not final. He touched the com panel one last time. This is Captain Reiss to all ships. All souls, all stubborn hearts who refused paradise because someone else still needed mourning. We are going out to the rim. We are going to draw a line in the dark and dare it to cross. Some of us will not come home. Most of us maybe. But every minute we hold that line is another minute a child on Earth gets to chase fireflies that are really stars. Another minute someone gets to fall in love under a sky that remembers how to shine. We do not go because we are guaranteed victory. We go because someone has to stand up and say, this far and no further. May God have mercy on us all. And if he is busy, may he at least look away long enough for us to do what needs doing. He released the panel. Silence. Then. From every ship, every throat, every heart, the lullaby rose slow, perfect, unbreakable. The fleet ignited. They did not jump. There was no gate left, no shortcut. They simply accelerated, sails flaring gold, reactors screaming. 3 billion voices braided into one defiant chord. The journey to the rim took 41 days of drills, of stories told around mess tables, of baptisms in recycled water and weddings under starlight that streamed through patched viewports. 41 days of watching the creeping darkness grow thicker on long-range scopes, until it blotted out half the sky on the 41st night. Elias stood alone on the observation deck and watched the rim approach. It was no longer a line. It was a wall of living night, taller than galaxies, older than time. Eyes opened along its surface, vast, cold, curious. It had waited. It had learned patience the way stone learns patience, and it was singing the counter melody, the promise of the quiet garden, perfect and painless and forever. Elias felt it tug at the hollow place inside him where 3 billion missing souls still ached. He felt the temptation to simply open the sails, let the darkness take them, end the long war with surrender disguised as mercy. He reached for the crucifix brand on his chest and pressed until it hurt. Then he opened the all-fleet channel one last time. Play it, he said. Every speaker, every every heart aboard every ship began to broadcast the only weapon they had left, the lullaby, not soft now, not gentle. Loud, raw, human voices raised in every language that ever called Earth home, layered over the roar of reactors and the crackle of sails catching solar wind. Children's voices soaring over the base of old men who had nothing left but this one last note. The wall of darkness shuddered. They hit it at full burn. The impact was not physical. There were no explosions, no debris. Only light slamming into night like sunrise into a tomb. The fleet poured through the breach they carved, sails blazing. Voices unbroken dot, and on the other side they found the quiet garden, not the small pocket they had abandoned. Something vaster. A mockery of creation, an endless twilight meadow where 3 billion souls wandered in perfect, drugged happiness. Children forever young. Lovers forever courting. Parents forever tucking in children who would never grow up dot, and at its heart, the thing that had no name wore the gardener's face dot, it smiled with stolen kindness. Welcome home. It said, wearing the voice they had all loved. Lay down your weapons. Rest. Elias felt his knees buckle. Then Myra's voice, small, fierce, carried on every channel because some engineer had patched her bedtime song into the main broadcast, cut through the lie. Daddy, the stars are crying again. The false gardener flickered. Elias straightened. He stepped forward until he stood at the very edge of the bridge blister, separated from the darkness by nothing but transparisteel and will. You are not him, he said. You never were. He raised his hand. Every ship in the fleet followed suit, sails flaring to maximum, reactors pushed into emergency red. 3,000,001 voices rising into a single, wordless roar of refusal. The darkness lunged dot, and humanity answered with light. Not the gardener's light. Not borrowed grace dot, their own, every memory they had carried back from paradise. Every tear they had refused to stop shedding. Every promise to never abandon another soul ignited at once. The quiet garden shattered like stained glass struck by sunrise. Souls, 3 billion of them, blinked, looked around, and for the first time in subjective eternity, remembered grief, and chose it. They turned as one, and began walking toward the light of the fleet. The false gardener screamed, a sound that cracked the void itself, and reached for them. Elias stepped through the broken blister, into vacuum, into nothingness, arms wide. The crucifix brand on his chest blazed white. He did not fall. He walked dot across the emptiness between heartbeats, across the grave of universes. He walked until he stood between the darkness and his people, and he spoke the only words left. Not today. The darkness crashed against him like a tide against a cliff made of stubborn, impossible love. It broke. When the light cleared, there was only silence and stars, more stars than the Milky Way had ever held, because every soul that had been lost was now a star burning fierce and eternal, placed by hands that finally understood the cost. Elias Juno Reiss floated in the sudden quiet. Empty, spent, human. Gentle arms caught him, arms he recognized. The real gardener smiled down at him, eyes bright with proud and ancient tears. Well done, he whispered. Well done, my good and faithful son. Elias tried to speak and could not. The gardener pressed a kiss to his forehead, the way a father kisses a child who has just come home from war. Then he carried Elias home. They buried him, what was left of him, on the hill above Jerusalem, beneath the olive tree that had somehow survived every apocalypse. Lena and Mira stood hand in hand as the sun set behind a galaxy that would never dim again. Mira looked up at the sky and pointed. Daddy's star, she said. Simply. It was the brightest one, low on the horizon, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Lena smiled through tears. Yes, baby. That's Daddy. He's keeping watch. Far away, beyond the rim where no darkness could ever reach again. The thing that had no name curled into itself and learned a new word. Defeat.